Hello, I'm Brother Dr. Ron Kennedy Bailey, Chairman of the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at LSU School of Medicine, New Orleans, also in the role of Assistant Dean for Diversity and Community Engagement. Very happy to come to you tonight on this AlphaMex program in my role as the Deputy Surgeon General for Mental Health of our Surgeon General Initiative. As always, we give credit to our General President, President Lonzer, for supporting and acknowledging this idea that we needed a program about brothers and for brothers within our fraternity to address the key themes that are problematic and troubling for African American men in our organization, but really throughout the entire country and the diaspora. In addition, I give tremendous credit to our Surgeon General, our brother Jeff Sterling, emergency medicine out of Fort Worth, Texas, but born and raised in the Chicago area. He conceptualized the idea, really formulated it, and really brought it to fruition. I think for that he deserves a remarkable credit. This is a program that I've been involved in now for 2 years, and I think I'm very happy that in mental health, we have an opportunity about once a month to present a topic of salience and importance. Tonight, we have kind of a wide-ranging discussion. I've been asked to speak about and address the issue of suicide, and I'm a psychiatrist, but also I think what the underpinnings of suicide may be. Community challenges and, fiscal difficulties and relationships conflicts and much of the discrimination and bias that adversely affects young African men, again, within our fraternity and outside. So we have a really outstanding group. Looking forward to a good spirited discussion for this hour from 7 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'd like to introduce all of them in total, and then we'll have them speak individually. First night, we're going to have Hoing Daniel Nguyen. Hoing Nguyen is a Health and Wellness Ministries Program Manager at the Foundation of Praise in Houston, Texas. He develops programs to educate communities and congregation to improve health outcomes, provide health awareness on disparities, and provide free medical screenings through partnerships with various health organizations. He's a diabetes self-management education and support instructor under the city's Changing Diabetes and Healing Circle facilitator for the National Alliance of the Mentally Ill, the NAMI there in our Greater Houston, and a core member of the Interfaith Behavior and Mental Health Conference. So a lot of work, I think, in this space. Concurrently, he's also a professor at Houston Community College in the Department of Biology with published research in breast cancer regarding P53 mutations. Before joining the Fountain of Praise, where he is now, he served 3 years as a high school AP physics teacher at the Yes Prep High Schools there in Houston. When he isn't teaching, he's a variety of activities. He advocates for equitable healthcare. He swims, bikes, runs long distance marathons as a triathlete, enjoys artisan cinema, and volunteers at Avenue 360 Omega House Hospice. Educationally, the brother Nguyen got a bachelor's degree in kinesiology at the University of Houston and a master's in biochemistry and molecular biology at Tulane University in New Orleans. He was initiated in the Eta Mu chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity at the University of Houston in the spring of 2013, and currently is a proud member of Alpha Eta Lambda, the grad chapter there in Houston. Before going to Brother Nguyen, I was also introduced 2 other panelist brothers who will be joining us tonight. Brother Brian Turner is a PhD psychologist, a native of New Orleans, completed his undergrad studies at the Southern University of Baton Rouge. Brother Turner completed his doctoral studies in clinical psychology at Jackson State University in Mississippi. He's the owner and operator of Moments of Truth, LLC, a private practice as a licensed clinical psychologist in New Orleans. He currently serves as associate professor and department head in the Department of Psychology at Xavier University in Louisiana. Clinically, Dr. Turner has worked on a diversity of issues, client settings. Most ardently, he's worked with Black males from adolescence to adulthood on a wide spectrum of clinical, emotional, behavioral issues. And final member of our panel today will be Dr. Dashiell Guyon, EDD. Dr. Guyon is the owner and director of the Clinical Research and Practice Associates in Houston, Texas. He's conducted behavioral science research and published articles in journals, books, and monographs. He's a licensed and board certified in clinical practice, supervision, and healthcare leadership in the state of Texas. Dr. Guyon, a psychologist there in Houston, has served on the hospital staff and faculty at the collegiate level. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas, completed graduate work at Texas Southern University and University of Texas at Houston. Dr. Guy was a recipient of an Executive Education Award and postdoc fellowships at the National Institute of Drug Abuse, the NIH, at Harvard University, the T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and at the National Institute of Public Health. So we're going to welcome Brothers Nguyen, Brother Dr. Turner, and Brother Dr. Guyan. I think we're going to start with Brother Hoy Nguyen. Brother Nguyen, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Everybody's schedule's busy tonight, but we know you're going to bring great value to us. And I think it's your first time on this show, so welcome and good to see you.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey. And first and foremost, I just want to say it's kind of amazing little treat for me because I actually watched these webinars myself just for my own learning, and to now be on here, it's kind of fun to see. But I just got to thank first and foremost General President Brother Lonzer for this initiative, as well as Brother Surgeon General Sterling, and then of course yourself, Brother Dr. Bailey. And so it's an honor to be here, and I'm happy to be here as well. So excited for the discussion.
Well, I appreciate it. And I hate to, miss the opportunity to give a lot of thanks. There's a brother who's the chapter president in Houston, Texas at Alpha Beta Lambda. His name is Earl Allen. I've known him a long time. Great guy. And I thank him for sending you our way. And I also think that Jeff Sterling gets a lot of credit for acknowledging that we really want to really move toward honoring and offering opportunity to really address the message to brothers of all age ranges and groups. The reality is young brothers have a lot to say and a lot that I think we all need to hear. So we probably are coming to you tonight with an increasing focus, I think, on a varied perspective. I know you are recently out of college and grad school, but you still are close enough to have a good idea to share with us what maybe some of the challenges that young brothers are experiencing. So I'll begin maybe with a couple considerations. One, first and foremost, we're talking about suicide, and our numbers, unfortunately, are striking. I note this suicide is a major national public health issue. We had the highest suicide rate in American history documented in 2022. 49,500 people died by suicide. But those numbers have been increasing over the last several years. In 2020, we had 45,799. I think in 2021, we had 42,773. So the reality is suicide numbers have been increasing. Historically, as a psychiatrist, I'd share that often people have commented about that throughout my career. Many have thought that, blacks don't suicide or young people don't. It's historically been an issue demographically of older Caucasian men who are alcoholic. But unfortunately, we're seeing more younger people suicide than before. And really and truly, we're seeing more adolescents, so young African women, but younger people are trying to commit suicide with different means. The two most common ways that people, unfortunately, successfully commit suicide are with a gun or with hanging or suffocation, not just with pills. So although this discussion tonight won't be totally about suicide, a discussion, I think, to address what may be some of the considerations that younger adults in our fraternity and otherwise are experiencing is something I think our audience really needs to hear. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts, reflections on kind of where are we going and what are young people thinking that may be putting them at this degree of stress.
Absolutely. So I would say it is very interesting position that we're in, or time that we're witnessing. Those that are in the millennials or generation, we're seeing this shift of being aware of mental illness, but also needing to address it. And so there's that foremost aspect of it of like, we are addressing mental illness, we are addressing anxiety, depression, and as well as suicide. But we're also, because we're that bridge, the generation before us or our upbringing typically pushed away mental illness topics. We're brought up in a generation of, hey, you don't share your emotions, you like, all right, well, there's actually better ways to handle that. Now, on the flip side, the younger generation, millennials still fall in this as well, but younger generations, we're seeing a slight uptick of this because now we have access. Our cell phones gives us access to everything that we can imagine. From all of our social media, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever we use, there's constant nonstop consumption of just media in general. And sometimes that media can be triggering. That media can spark isolation. It can spark feelings of self-doubt. And in a world now where we are really marketing, and marketing's become content creation is now comes an aspect of, well, am I doing that? Am I content creating? Is the content that I'm pushing out even relevant? Do people even care? And so in a world where we're feeling more connected, there's also aspects of we're feeling more isolated. And with the societal pressures, with institutional racism, as well as just health resource, this is our problem. Done.
Yeah, we have a little trouble hearing you there at the end. I think that we need a little. The band connectivity may have been a little weaker, but I hear you loud and clear. The increased access to information can be good or bad. We have empirical data that points out that for many it creates more stress, not less, because people want you to be in touch with them more regularly. B, I think more people in general quantitatively have access to you, but I think qualitatively, the type of messaging that occurs has really grown or changed. I think what people will say in social media messaging is much more substantial. People will, argue and they'll use all capitals and they'll communicate with exclamation points or what have you. These emojis, which theoretically, brings an emotional component to what they're sharing. We regularly tell persons that probably the best thing to do when you're in a pickle or if you're having a high intensity discussion, is pick up the phone and call someone and talk face to face. Hopefully that decreases some degree of the more rampant and more common misunderstandings that can happen with text messaging and social media messaging, where it's very easy to send a message that's not exactly on point with what one thinks or what one is trying to accomplish. I also think you make a very tangible point, this idea that it's unending. I mean, you kind of always are on in this day and age. And as a psychiatrist, I actually see that in my practice. Patients will complain and families will complain that individuals don't stop. Now, we have diagnoses in psychiatry that fall along that line. Bipolar disorder is probably the most common when a person is manic or hypermanic. Some people are a little bit less intense to that, but still more than normal in their behavioral distribution of activity is being hypomanic. So the reality is we clearly see changes in how persons engage and interact. And there can be a lot of that, I think excessively so in contemporary times because of the access to rampant media and these communication devices that are always in somebody's hand. Like my group, when I was at Meharry Mid College from, I think, 08 to 14, we published a paper on what we call text mania, how some individuals in texting would go so fast and do too fast and talk so fast, they're trying to text you at the same time, you're texting them, and the responses back and forth are rapid fire. It's almost as if that person is being manic. In fact, I'll just share with the audience. Holmgren and I have done some things together professionally, and we're aware of some individuals who, over the course of a short period of time, maybe like one week, two people had like 1,000 text messages that they described exchanged between the two of them, which actually really does kind of point out that for some people, there has to be what we would view as an excessive amount of communication in a short period of time. One can also imagine that may make it a lot easier to misunderstand someone or to take things out of context, more or less, and also maybe to lead to some hard or harsh feelings when not done well or accurately. So all issues that I think you're right are consistent with what we see in psychiatry is kind of problematic, can be problematic. Moving to the next issue, though, regarding violence, and because I spend a lot of time on violence prevention, at some level that may actually lead to a bigger ticket item. We do tend to see more conflict. I think more fights. Clearly on television, you see more violence. I mean, because even news on now and people are running into the store and grabbing all of the clothes and the like or whatever. So there definitely seems to be more activity, more risk taking, more potential activity that can lead to aggression or agitation or violence in young adults. And we all are always capturing the idea of what's causing this or what might be the generating these concerns. Be interested in your thoughts about that as well.
Absolutely. The increase in violence is definitely prevalent. And it's more, again, it kind of ties back to the social media piece because now we're seeing that violence all the time. We used to just see if you hear now it's or incident happens. For example, at Yes Prep, there was a school shooting of Yes Prep, and the students were literally documenting everything on TikTok and it was being posted. And if you just nonstop scroll, then you're going to be consuming that violence. And then that goes in terms with also cyberbullying. And so, what are ways that people are being bullied on online, just online presence at all? And then what is being attitude of, you know what, maybe I. And so the violence piece is one that definitely needs to be talked about and acknowledged. But I also see violence as a way that it's just misdirected expression of what we may be feeling. And we just haven't been taught the proper ways to actually express or communicate how we're feeling in the more healthier ways. And we turn to these maladaptive processes of coping. And violence can be an extension modality of that.
Well, you time in your comments. I mean, clearly, we learn in psychiatry and organized psychiatry that suicide is violence turned inward. So the concept is that you're mad at something external, someone or something, your life or challenges or successes or lack thereof. But some people, for a number of reasons, maybe cultural, turn that violence toward themselves and try to harm themselves. Historically, we've seen people reach out for what we call self-medication, be it alcohol or other kind of toxic substances. Some call them drugs. I have a hard time calling them things drugs anymore, the psychiatrists, because it's increasingly hard to know what's legal and what's illegal in some places. Alcohol is legal. Many more people die in our country each year due to the use of the toxic substance alcohol than some things that are considered illegal in some places. Marijuana be a good example. So the reality is, any substance that goes to your brain that can affect how your behavior and your thought patterns and your thought processes and how you respond can make you impulsive or slur of speech and the like, can be a toxic substance. It can be a drug, if you will, that has some adverse impact. Clearly, these are issues that I think of great moment for us because in an organization like Alpha Phi Alpha, we have a responsibility, I think, internally as professionals to help our young brothers see these, hurdles coming down the road, find ways to jump over them successfully, and not be kind of caught up. We all feel really bad when there's a really adverse circumstance, suicide being the worst case example. But there are a variety of other issues that can occur to young men that I think are avoidable. And we've got to find ways to communicate that piece, I think, a little bit better kind of going forward.
I agree. And Dr. Bailey, one of the things that we definitely notice as well, especially with the younger generation, is increase in access to vaping. Vaping has been one of the substances that's just been so prominent. I promise you, in every single school district, vapes are being collected every single day. And just the accessibility of it, I guess the more so convenience of being able to use it anywhere without essentially leaving a trace is leading to those type of addictions, hedonistic type of behavior that we start to see with our young adults and adolescents, and especially at such a young age, that can definitely disrupt their behavior, their thinking, their patterns, and then especially trying to balance with the outside world of what they're dealing with, combined with these different substances, whether it be alcohol, vaping, that nature, then you have a concoction brewing of just internal struggle. And that's what we need to do. We have to find ways to teach these young kids uh, how to navigate that, how to navigate life, how to navigate the world in a digital age. And that's extremely important for us to do, but also just make it known. And then have healthy examples of how to do that, teaching them, but also seeing representation of that happening. So within Alpha ourselves, having Black men come to the schools and teach these young Black boys how to do that. And they have representation that is extremely valuable to help they learn how to properly cope.
It goes a long way towards saying that, issues regarding mentorship. Historically,
Thank
persons
you.
have always wanted that professional day or career day where others would kind of come in and try to manage that. Huge issues, I think you'd argue, kind of going forward, that could be very beneficial for all. I also think it's important to recognize that when young persons have some difficulty, one of our strategies has to be an alfalfa to with a stern and appropriate, but a soft and a helpful hand to reach back to help and support and really kind of move toward a model where we can give persons the opportunity to do better. I do think it's been kind of problematic that in many settings we haven't always had that, and some would argue that this may go back a long time, not just let alone weeks and months and years, but years and decades and centuries. The idea that too many entities and groups would over manage and over punish and over ridicule black males, especially young black males, ostensibly under the auspices that this is a group that we really couldn't expect to do right or do better, and we had to be remarkably antagonistic and kind of hostile toward them in that particular setting. I think it's also relevant that we certainly see and appreciate that we have to be able to teach people to ask for help. At times, we don't do that well. Teach individuals to ask for help, or actually be involved in that process where you're asking as you can kind of go forward. When we don't do so, I think we do that to our own detriment. And we don't give, I think, the relative benefit of the value of our knowledge base and our experience for those who I think should understand that, need to appreciate it, and be able to kind of, I think, move forward, go ahead, kind of moving forward. As a psychiatrist, my experience has been that young black males often initially come in to see a guy like myself, a psychiatrist or a psychologist like doctors Turner or Guyan, and don't have much to say at first. Too many people have been acclimated or acculturated not only not to talk, but not to really open up and share what's actually really on their mind and what's most likely to be effective, what we need to do to kind of help them kind of going forward. I do think that that's key. The reality is there's a whole lot to be said for our capacity to not only help, but help kind of going forward, to give young people a chance to realize that, we support them, we believe in them, and that, you're not a person is really not only as good as their last mistake or the last good day. We shouldn't have individuals in a mindset that, they're going to wait until, they can't do anymore, and then we're going to kind of come down on them. Huge issues that I think are kind of problematic in that setting. I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I think I've been involved in this setting. I think that, a lot of this kind of gravitates toward the issue of violence or gun violence. This group is aware that, I wrote a book in 2018 on gun violence, September of 18, it came out, and in early 2021 wrote a book on domestic violence. Also, a story that, as I was writing a book on gun violence, I was always surprised at how many issues in the gun violence literature across the world. I did a worldwide search to try to find the best data on gun violence everywhere, not just in the U.S., let alone just in this region of the country, Texas, where I'm from, or Louisiana, where I am now. But we look at the gun violence data, so much of it really is applicable for domestic violence. So I pulled some pieces out of a research item that I was reading that I was going to reference and review, and then I put some more to the side. Well, I made the point that almost parenthetically, when I finished writing a book on gun violence, I felt like, I had a substantial component, almost a third to half a book on domestic violence. As bad as that sounds, it really kind of points out how we superimpose these issues extraordinarily, I think, on each. And there's so much to be said for individuals who are in the middle of this gun violence risk kind of going forward, the trouble that it causes them, the difficulty, and the overall, I think, risk that comes into play, I think, for organizations, groups, and communities when gun violence issues are in play. All too often, you're a lot more likely to hurt somebody who's close to you, who's closest to you, somebody who you live with. And that kind of brings to the forefront the idea of domestic violence as compared to the term IPV, or intimate partner violence. And I myself had to really do a deep dive to really think about it and really learn what this meant kind of going forward over time. Clearly, I, like most people, have always kind of focused on the idea that you're going to have domestic violence. And I kind of thought that any harm to a people who you were related to or live with was domestic. But the truth is, domestic simply means those who you are living with, whether you're related to them or not, or no matter what kind or type or intensity or quality of relationship you're involved with them. IPV has kind of developed over time, and I was to kind of speak to this. I was to ask Brother Wynn what his thoughts are about whether young men are in more trouble in this regard, this area as well. Well, IPV kind of came into play because we appreciated some of the differences in the saliency of harming persons who you're involved in an intimate relationship with, whether it's sexual or not, but it's close and it's intimate, it's engaging, you sharing your innermost thoughts or considerations, verbally and otherwise, whether you live with them or not. So some people, will have a very close and, biting and poignant relationship with someone who they're in an intimate relationship with, although they may not live with them, but that may be the person who they expect the most of and they're the most demanding of, and they have the most challenges in trying to really work through and kind of work together on. I also think it's important when we talk about the gun violence literature to be aware of what some of the highest level co-occurring concerns are. So I described the Big Five, and I know I've discussed this issue in this with this group before, but I think on a discussion like today about suicide, as Hong Wen said, there's a very short step over to the issue regarding homicide as well. I think that people should recognize that as I like to say, the gun is the problem, and it is a remarkable problem. It's kind of hard to move forward. I think B, it's also true that we have research on gun violence that we probably should read and listen to, and we should actually do more research. We should probably do research. We've been blocked by the so-called Dickey Amendment. Dickey was a congressman of Arkansas years ago that kind of blocked us from doing research kind of historically, and we really never got that back. So if you write a book on gun violence like I did, it's really hard to have the most optimal data if we're not doing research at the highest level. Three, to the point about listed research we actually already have, I'm a strong believer that we should use the so-called biotechnology. You buy a gun and they can program it, think like James Bond movies, or train it to only work for you with your fingerprint. Otherwise, you hope that that would decrease, if not eliminate, a lot of folks who want to break into your house and steal your gun and then kind of go off and engage in nefarious activities with it. Further, we also should recognize that there's just too many guns. I mean, the volume of guns is too high. Right now, there's more guns than people in America. 40 million guns is estimated, 350 million people. So the sheer volume means that there's a lot of access, and there's going to be a lot more accidents. People reach for a gun very quickly, unnecessarily, and that's kind of a problem. And the fifth and final point is I think we should also recognize that understanding the whole gun consideration is going to be key. Is this whole idea of the culture, but also I think it's a problem kind of going forward that we really have to, I think, be thoughtful and mindful of. I'm gonna come back to Brother Wynn, let him kind of speak to this issue about kind of guns in the community, I think, of young men. And so we've been joined by Dr. Guyan. I'll let him kind of comment on Brother Wynn's comments about guns, and what the concept may be that there's just seems to be so many guns volumetrically in our society that may play a role in some of these cultural problems that we actually have. Joined by Turner now as well. After Dr. Brother Wynn's comments, we'll go to Dr. Turner. I think he's on a short schedule today. Then we'll go to Dr. Guyan. Brother Wynn?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, the use of gun violence is extremely prominent. And I think a lot of it is we're seeing that from the media is one aspect of it, and different ways, right? And I think the other aspect of too is when it comes to gun violence, one is also understanding just how dangerous guns are and how to actually, if you are going to utilize them and have them, like what does gun safety actually look like? A lot of times we, whether it be at the school or training for situations that involve gun violence, it's all right, well, what do you do when this happens? Instead of, hey, we're just teaching the techniques of how to avoid it. But it's not necessarily addressing the issue of an individual has a gun and now they're going to be using it. And even recently, they're using the guns that are seen. They're being fired. They're shot, and then now we're just leaving guns out on the street. It's like they just leave them there. And so there's different type of, like you said, things that we need to address in terms of using weapons or guns, and we need to address that.
Yeah, I want to move to Dr. Turner. Turner, thanks for joining us. We said for some time now. I give Jeff Sterling certain credit for something. I got a young brother on here, and Brother Wynn has kind of brought the wood today. He's talked a little bit about this idea about what do young people think and what do young men in our fraternity and outside, what some of the challenges are, and why there may be more mental health concerns in general of young men, and why we probably as more senior level brothers in the fraternity should find ways to engage with them and communicate with them bi-directionally and hear their messaging. And we kind of begin to move a little bit more into what some of the offsite might be, violence and a little bit toward guns toward the end. But I've introduced you earlier. Want the audience to hear some of your thoughts, Brother Turner. The reality is you at Xavier, you on a lot of young guys there. I'm sure you got your thumb on the pulse of what's bothering young brothers, and that's what we probably need to make sure we talk about on this show and try to find ways to address it. I'll give you the floor.
Greetings, brothers. I appreciate the opportunity to join you. I'm actually trying to make sure I got power. I actually had the privilege of being with our gubernatorial candidate in Louisiana, Sean Wilson, who is a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha. So my apologies for taking time to try to support him and being a little late. But I think that actually goes into the point that we're talking about. What I found in my practice and in my role at Xavier University is that all too often I find that younger brothers seem to be a little bit more disconnected from what's going on. And what that means is, unlike a lot of the older generations, right, past generations, there seem to be a little bit better camaraderie across time and space. So my biggest thought, and my research actually points out the fact that for most African American young men, the key factor in success in life is being connected to other brothers. So when we talk about higher education, when we talk about the role of our fraternity and other groups and other agencies, the reality of it is, where are we connecting with young brothers in a positive way? See, the reality is that is all too often, Brother Bailey, you know this, we don't ride around in Bugattis and Lamborghinis and Corvettes, and we're not necessarily popping bottles and ride with models. So we're not necessarily attractive. But we are faced with a challenge of helping our brothers understand the utility and the viability of the lives that we lead. And as we understand through our aims and our fraternity, what we're here to do is create an opportunity for our brothers to succeed. And so if we think about the juxtaposition of how we are in society today, we have to make the life that we live the attractive life for young brothers to understand that the longevity of what we provide, the concretization of what we do, right? That we are static, that we are pillars, that we're men in our community, and that they can be the same in the same way, men who provide. And as that old saying is, we have to be prepared to plant trees, knowing that we'll never sit under the shade.
Yeah, I love this part regarding how we look, because if we live in a world now, an age now where very often, people got a short attention span. Media dominates today. For people like kind of all of us who kind of put a lot of time and effort in to get these degrees and these masters and a whole lot, yours or whatever, it's kind of, short-term sacrifice for long-term gratification. Many of us, myself included, probably have to recognize that sometimes that may not be a message that your young guys hear, but it's still my responsibility as a clinician to find a way to give a message that actually resonates so that they actually hear.
Right. And I think that's the tough part right now, right? We find ourselves in a position where we're also battling the political climate, right? As Brother Wynn was talking about the issue around violence, right? We also have to think about what's happening in regards to how young brothers see and view manhood, right?
Yes.
What does a man really look like in today's society? And also often for our younger brothers, a man is looking like somebody who's strong and powerful. That's why a video that I use by a documentarian, Byron Hurt, he looks at Barack Obama versus 50 Cent. And he compares the vitality of both of those black men in America and how they both represent strength, but they also represent the dichotomization of black masculinity and what that means. And so the reality is, why can't we in essence encumber ourselves to be both strong but also intelligent? And so that's usually where I get a lot of young brothers like, look, I can show you how to be both smart but also cool and also intelligent. And I think that's really one of the key factors in our engagement with younger brothers that we could think about. How do we show brothers how to be strong and smart? How do we show them how to be emotionally present, but also how to be consistent, right? And how to also be a rock, right? There's nothing wrong with being able to cry, but you can also be strong for others. That would be my challenge.
I want to move to Dr. Guy, and I cannot thank you enough for joining. I was mentioning before you guys kind of introduced all three of you, and I said that, my experience has been, you go to a restaurant, the line is long, you shouldn't leave, you should wait. The line is long because the food is good. Kind of the same here. We got good brothers on today, and you guys got busy schedules. So I cannot thank you enough for jumping on. I'd be remiss if I didn't let people know that I like all these brothers, but Dr. Guy is a special brother. He's from Beaumont, Texas, and I'm from Beaumont, Texas, and we're not in New York, so we got to stick together if you're from these little small towns in the South. But very proud of Dash. Dash Guyan has run some remarkably important programs, I think, for young black males there in Houston. And I want to give you a chance to kind of address these issues. Our theme tonight, of course, was the big ticket issue of suicide. We really talk about the underpinnings that leads to the problems that young black males have before you get to this point of suicide. And I think within our fraternity, some of these challenges exist as well. So the reality is we got to kind of address and clean up our own house, I would argue, to make sure we take care of our own. That's the thought, I think, of the rationale that General President Alonzo had in supporting this idea of this Surgeon General initiative. And I think our Surgeon General Jeff Sturr, give him credit for conceptualizing it. Love to have you on today's show, and happy to hear your thoughts, Dr. Guy.
Well, thank you, Brother Bailey. And always, it's good to be in the presence of alpha men. It always makes me feel good when I'm among my brothers. A little bit on a perspective that is associated with young African American males and some of the work that I've done with regards to that, and kind of dovetailing on what the brother just said before, with this whole thing of what we might call hypermasculinity. You know, there's in my work, in my clinical practice, when I'm doing clinical work, I try to focus a lot on young Black and even Hispanic males, because a lot of them bring on, and let me just say men in color, a whole different cultural perspective than what has been traditionally done. And so they bring a different dynamic to a session. They bring a different dynamic. And if you're not attuned to what's going on and how they see things and perhaps their worldview, you're subject to miss them totally. And, you know, we're now in an industry in a time where, you know, well, mental health is a popular thing now. Everybody's, you know, going into therapy and getting help. And it's, but if we look at sort of the traditional way things were done, particularly with African American males, a lot of times I remember even growing up, Black men were socialized to be cool. You know, that was the thing. You know, you walk with a swag, you show no emotions, you were taught to be tough, you know, you show no, and you dare not cry unless you lost at a basketball game. But, you know, real men don't cry. You know, you suck it up, you take it in, real men. And that sometimes can be problematic from what I can see, particularly in the African American community, because these pent up emotions can very well manifest into counterproductive kind of behaviors that leads many of these young African American males down a path of destruction. I see it happening with aggressive, a violent type of behavior. I see it happen in terms of perhaps how they relate to young women. I see it happening in terms of alcohol and perhaps drug use. So there's a number of things that we have to look at to sort of redefine what is a real man. And that real men do have emotions. Real men do cry. Real men do feel discomfort, and it's okay, you know, to express those. Now, of course, you know, if we're looking at it again from a cultural perspective, that's one of those things that, you know, well, you can't do that. You know, you're considered to be weak and you can't. So that's a challenge, even down to the point to where, according to the research that I've read, it can have manifestations into the health concerns, contributing to high blood pressure and other kind of somatic type of illnesses that Black men tend to experience. So, you know, I think it is important in terms of giving this message, as the brother just prior to me had suggested, that you can still be a man. We're not taking anything away from you. You still got your testosterone. That's a good thing. But the reality is that we got to find a different way of dealing with perhaps the stressors and the things that we have to look at. I mean, as he indicated, 50 Cent and Barack Obama are both very much symbols of strength, you know, and those are very real factors. And we want to be able to help our young men see things through a different worldview.
A good transition, I think, to Hong Nguyen. I think that these two senior brothers, both psychologists in big cities, New Orleans and Houston, with private practices, and really addressing, I think, their experience professionally, I think, and interpersonally with young men, trying to find ways to, as Brian Turner said, you know, hear the messaging that they're sharing with us, and to be relevant, and not to be, you know, outside their worldview. And as Brother Dr. Guyan points out, the reality is to be able to communicate that you can be a man and be what I'll call a multidimensional man. You can be strong physically, and you can cry. You can be adept and adequate, but you can also, have a family side or familiar side that addresses kind of how you feel about things. I do wonder for individuals who, may be in a different genre, a different, age range. I think that I'm the end of baby boomers, so I think now we're in generation X or Y or Z. One of them. I mean, your guess as good as mine. That there certainly may be some challenges in the peer pressure that comes into play as folks talk about how they should be a bit more broad and diverse and understanding different sides that men tend to have. I've also thought it was actually tough because, if you superimpose that on top of the additional challenges of being, marginalized and very often in societies that discriminate against you based on your race or gender or religion, it's harder to succeed. And then you turn around and you're being messaged not to act like it bothers you. Has to be quite a complex and one that I think may be difficult for young guys to think through. Did you see your thoughts, Brother Wynn?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind when we discuss about this is the word vulnerability. But I know a kind of a coin term that's been used a lot, and I know I use it a lot, is safe space. What is a safe space and what does that look like? I think a lot of times where, we do have these toxic masculinity where we can't really vocalize or be vulnerable with what exactly we're feeling or dealing with for a multitude of reasons. And I kind of want to emphasize on the fact of having a community, camaraderie, support group to where you can express it. I think a lot of times with the internal struggle, just hearing yourself express what you're going through or what's heavy on your heart or what's on your mind, and allowing yourself to internally process by hearing your own voice say what's going on is one way where we can alleviate that. But then on the flip side of that, you also have to have someone on the other end that's willing and understanding enough to empathize with you, not necessarily try to fix the problem, but just hear you. And having that support so that we can kind of break down that toxic masculinity wall of vulnerability and emotions and expressions is probably one of the easiest ways to jumpstart that. And then from there, we can start thinking about different type of ways that we can combat it. But just the fine meaning of expression itself, finding what is this emotion that I'm dealing with, just putting it out there so that way you hear yourself, you internalize it. And then from there, you can take actionable steps with the supports that we have. And just having an empathetic ear as well. And I think that's what young Black men are looking for in terms of wanting to feel like, hey, we can be a man that's multidimensional. We can be men that are expressive with how we're feeling. Because I think that's what truly is a man, is being able to vocalize what it is that you're feeling without having the pressure of that weighing you down. And when you're able to do that, then you can move forward and take actionable steps. And from there, you can come to a greater perspective of healing. And then in turns help others along the way.
Yeah, you make several points that resonate. And I'm gonna ask Dr. Turner to kind of respond to this, and Dr. Guyan as well. But I shared that I'm a 30-year Black psychiatrist, Black male psychiatrist. I've said this on the show before, and I love when I'm in some place and there's some discussion about how Black men don't talk or tell their story or go to a psychiatrist, and I tell people I can't get Black men to stop talking to me, right? And this has been my experience for the better part of 30 years. Now, it's true that fewer, I won't say few, but certainly it's better now than it was 30 years ago, do the formal way. They don't schedule an appointment and sit in the waiting room and that whole business. But guys call you and they want to meet you at Starbucks and touch base a little bit or whatever. And since we all frat men, I mean, what happens to me at frat meeting, and it happens at all of these frat meetings, that somebody comes up when they're having the post-meeting exchange of beverages, and can I talk to you, brother, or whatever. And it may start off in front of people about football. I'm in New Orleans, the Saints now. It used to be the Texans in Houston, or who's going to the NBA championship or whatever. But once we get outside, it's as much and as credible and as vibrant and as authentic a psychiatric session as I ever have in my office with a suit and tie on behind closed doors. It's the exact same emotional engagement And if you're a psychiatrist and a psychologist, you believe in. That's why you do this kind of work, because you think at some point you're making a connection with somebody and they need that connection to move forward. That's been my experience, Dr. Turner. I'm interested in yours and your thoughts and how you tend to handle that if you have some experience, because this may be one strategy for those of us in mental health to find a way to help brothers in our fraternity talk about these issues and then be able to address them professionally.
Definitely, I following up with Brother Wynn's points, and as you put it there, I'm a former college football player, and I've been able to work through the various associations with some NBA players and NFL players. I've worked in settings working with vets, and I think what you alluded to is the very thing that I think professionally becomes important, and it's the fact that we have to have clinicians and professionals who can connect with those we're trying to work with. We call that cultural competency. Dr. Joseph White, my mentor and noted psychologist, one of the things he told me growing up when I was doing this work, he said, we have to connect with young brothers because we need to understand what they're going through from the time they leave the womb until they go to the tomb. And what happens is, and I think Brother Wynn was tapping onto this, is the fact that we also have to be very mindful of the fact that professionally, we have to fight against the stigma of mental health that oftentimes permeates our communities. We have been locked down, locked away, locked up, and just locked. And that's because of sometimes the mental health apparatus. So we have to be mindful of our approach. So Brother Bailey, to your point, oftentimes when I meet folks, I'm in a t-shirt, jeans, and a pair of Jordans, and they don't even know who I am. Through conversations and through planting some seeds, that's helped me to grow a practice where I don't do any marketing, any advertising, and I stay pretty booked. And it's because of what was just alluded to, which is I show myself worthy of being able to be in that place, in that safe space, by building rapport. And I think that's a part of what we also have to do professionally, but also within our fraternity, is provide the opportunity for young brothers to understand the role that being a healthy man actually is. And being a healthy man is just what we've alluded to, being able to be emotionally available, right? Having a high emotional intelligence, having a psychological mindedness about oneself, being present in life, right? These are things that I think we have to begin to promote, but also we have to practice. I think as men in our fraternity, but also men in society, it matters when we show up. It matters when we speak. We can no longer be silent in these spaces and show ourselves as not wanting to talk, Brother Bale, as you said, because I'll just even say I had a client today, young Black male. I looked up and that hour had swiftly passed away. And all I could say, hey, man, we'll meet again in a week, because he wanted to continue. Yeah. And so we have to remove that idea that somehow brothers don't want to talk and don't want to do the work. We have to create this space. We have to be the change agents. We have to be the ones that tell our professions and our communities that we're here and we're going to do work.
Dr. Guy, I'm interested in your thoughts and what your experience has been as well.
Well, I have to echo the sentiments of my brothers that just spoke. They pretty much said the same thing I was going to say. That's been my experience, in working with African American men, creating an environment where they feel safe, where it's okay to express emotions, and it's okay to talk about the kinds of things that perhaps they would not talk about with their buddies or their friends, perhaps at the bar or at, and what's interesting, you get them in there and you get them comfortable, understand that what you tell me is confidential, and that my goal here is only to try to help you, feel better. We want to make some behavioral changes to improve the quality of life. And so these guys, I got one, like the other brother was saying, that I talked with just not too long ago, a 23-year-old African-American male who is having, some questions about his relationships with a woman and how it's the best way to be able to do that. And why is it that he's having these reservations about children and things like that. So I think not only that, but another part I think that's important, particularly those of us that are in this business, and particularly as we're working with young African-American men, sometimes Black men grow up in a home where there was no father. Okay. They really didn't have a positive role model. Or if they had a dad, the dad was more of a traditional kind of thinking, and dad just didn't talk much. So, um, this is a new phenomenon. This is a new area for them to be able to open up and still feel like it's okay for me to share these insecurities that I'm experiencing. It's okay for me to do that, with another male. A lot of times with brothers, we want to say, I don't want you to think certain way about me. But in my role, as a practicing clinician, in working with young Black men, I try to create an environment. And like the brother said just prior to me, it's like our time is up, and they want to keep going. So, those are some of the things that I've experienced, some of the things that I've seen, and it's hopeful for me, to see that. And I really try to get young Black males to really look at their attributes. A lot of them have perhaps poor self-esteem, lack of self-confidence, poor self-regulation, and don't see any value in the things that they say and do. And sometimes, really, guys, it's the most simplest things that they haven't even taken into consideration, that are attributes, core values that they have. And if they just would focus on those and build upon those, I think that would make them better men, perhaps better sons, better nephews, grandsons, husbands, boyfriends, dads, you name it.
Interesting, Dr. Guyan, in your experience, what's kind of been like one of your most challenging cases where you had a African American male, you're thinking you're making some progress, you're thinking that they're hearing you, you're thinking that you're, hitting all the right buttons, and it just kind of seems to go left, and it seems to be a big problem, or you get the message there's been some external adverse event. He was blanked, arrested or harmed or involved in an adverse circumstance. Those are always such challenges to me because, of course, I, like most people, want to believe when you're engaged and you think that they're hearing you and you think that you're moving the needle, so to speak. I imagine we all have some losses, so to speak. In others in medicine, I got a good friend, a cardiologist there in Houston. A loss for him basically somebody was in ICU and they don't make it.
Right.
Funeral. But I think for us, losses don't have to be measured in, living and dying, as important as that is. But we can't quite seem to get a young guy on the right track. Interested in your thoughts about that, and you've had an experience like that, and I imagine we all had them at some point, but kind of how you've responded, because there's also this issue about train the trainer and treat the treater that can be tough on us as well as professionals who take care of people in this setting. Somebody who looks a lot like us, you acclimate toward them, you bond with them, they're Black male as well, and you get a bad outcome.
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and that's a very good point. And I think perhaps some of my experiences associated with that, where I have worked with young African American males. One project I work on was an after-school program with at-risk inner-city Black males. As a matter of fact, I used that population to write my dissertation. And so I spent quite a bit of time with them in the after-school programs, working with them on different areas to try to build a sense of self-concept. Let's look at things differently. It's not all about in the streets and drugs and hanging out and loitering and things like that. And it's not always an easy task. You think you got them where they're going. They're showing affirmation. They're looking like they're making some progress. And lo and behold, you get a message the next day or in the middle of the night that they have been arrested or they got into a fight or something to that effect. It's a bit of a letdown because you invest a lot of yourself and you like to see this progress being made. I think those of us who go into this business are invested in helping humans, and that's where we get our gratification when we see other people progress. The thing about it, though, Brother Bailey, what I'm thinking is that I always like to say people make mistakes. And, that's why pencils have erasers. And, in working with these guys, and they may slip up, they may not, but I'm not gonna trash you because you made a mistake. Okay. We're not giving up on this. Hopefully we can learn from this, we can develop from this, we can grow from this, and keep trying to move forward. I'm not going to lose all hope. No, we may have to go back and revise our plan and try something different. But until there's just nothing else, I'm committed to trying to do what we can to try to make things better, and understand that, to err, to what is it, to err, human is error to human, human to error rather. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience with that.
Yeah, I kind of want to hit another area as we discuss this, and of course, this is for really all three of you. But I'm gonna kind of go to Brian Turner first. Yeah, I'm new in New Orleans, been on the ground for a couple of years, and my phone has rung a lot. Be on this task force, go to this event. You and I are going to some events together. I've invited you to some. You invited me to some. Alpha sponsored some. So a lot of people and organizations are in this space of what can we do to help young Black men, and I appreciate that, and I'm publicly thankful. But if we're going to do a deep, drill down and try to figure this whole piece out, I do think at times a lot of the same barriers come into play when you try to really move the needle in a very positive direction. I think about it because I was actually at a meeting, a pretty big meeting, and with Brian Turner, and Brian Turner whispered to me and said, same old, same old. And I think people like us have got to kind of figure out a way to move that needle. Maybe we have some good ideas. Maybe a lot of folks see what the problem is, trying to help address a lot of the points that Brother Hoing Wynn said, with a lot of the challenges that are occurring to young Black men. But it could be that some overarching barriers that block that, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And we got to find a way to move past that, because otherwise we may all feel like we're kind of spinning our wheels sometime, spending a lot of time in this space trying to be helpful on this very unique patient population that many think that we may have particularly beneficial, cultural, competent skill set to manage, as Brian said, but it doesn't always go through. Fair, Brian, or what do you think?
Well, I think the point you made is dear to, I think, both of our hearts as we've talked, and then sharing with our brothers here this evening. I think it gets right to the very point, is that we are in positions now at our institutions of higher learning, our agencies that provide services to our communities, but we have got to speak up and be the voice of reason in these moments. What Brother again was saying in regards to what happens with young Black men, I think is so integral to the point of what you just said, Brother Bailey, in regards to the fact that we understand the factors that are impacting young Black and brown men in our communities, either because we've been there or we have taken the requisite amount of time in our studies and our professional lives to understand this and to practice it. So we now have to marry, right? We have to marry the skill set we have with the science so that we can actually have the impact we want. And I think the way we do that is by honestly starting in some small ways. And it may not always bring the money, right? I think as we all think about it, we have to give of ourselves in a way that will actually become attractive to others so that we can get the support we need. But I think the best way to do it, honestly, Brother Bailey, is we have to do the work. And I think we do the work by going out into our communities, by being in our agencies, our institutions, higher learning, and talking the talk and walking the walk. So what that means to me is we have to understand when something comes along, we can't be silent anymore. And we have to also, as you say, how do we train the trainer? How do we treat the treater? We have to make sure that we support each other and support those who are in the trenches and understanding both the research, the data, and how it affects people. So for me, Brother Bailey, when we're in those meetings, we speak truth. And you know this. And we're going to keep speaking truth. We're going to speak truth until something changes.
We keep identifying good Brother Wynn as a young brother. Brother Wynn tells me he's a grown brother as well. So we understand. But you really caught my attention when you make that point about Yes Prep. Brother Wynn, you worked at some of the outstanding places for a young brother. And we commend you and acknowledge you, I think, publicly for that. I do wonder what's been your impression early on. What do you feel like you heard if you're at Yes Prep or Houston Community College and you do some work in the ministry setting there as well, some ministries, you used to work in NAMI? Or do you think that, so I do wonder if there's a cultural divide, or are there other levers to press and strategies for all four of us, people who touch this mental health umbrella, to make sure that our message is heard and that we're impactful? I guess is what I'm speaking toward.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind is implementing mental health resources and trainings and training the trainer type deals within Alpha. Like within our C2C program, we actually made a session for Black mental health. to ensure that College Brothers felt supported, and we are making it known. Hey, look, yeah, we want to do corporate to career, college to corporate, college to career. And it's one of those things where, hey, an important aspect of that, if you're going to go into the real world, is navigating mental health. And so it sets a tone very early on as you go through C2C. It's like, hey, this is a process and a section that is extremely prevalent and is needed for us to address. And in doing so, having, bringing in outside parties too. Hey, if you need to, you can have your first consultation on us, right? That's a service that we'll provide. And then we can, implement that on a bigger scale too at General Convention, having a session on mental health, just in broad terms, in general as well. And having all of our amazing brothers that are in this field to pour into that and then inspire maybe the next generation of young college brothers go into this field as well. And then we start to create this ripple effect. And ultimately, that's what we're kind of doing, right? Like I said, we want to be the speakers, the ones that are up in the forefront doing that. And a lot of times we use collaborations with third parties. And I also believe Alpha can be the forefront of that as well, just by implementing into programs that we already have, along with Project Alpha. As we go in that space too, it's like, hey, look, this is another opportunity to reach further down to younger generations too about the importance of mental health and being that. I think the more frequency we have about this, talking about these discussions, will eliminate the stigma for future generations. But the other issues too is that the more that older generations speak about it, it makes it more common, it makes it more known. And we slowly start to close that gap of a divide between two generations saying, hey, parents just don't understand what I'm feeling, or to a more conducive conversations, like you were saying, or we're just having regular conversations, and it turns into one of the best therapeutic sessions that you can have. And so just implementing it, making it well known, being intentional about what it is that we're trying to convey, and just keep putting it out there. I think one of the things that ends up happening is we discuss it and we talk about it, which is important. But then what are the actionable steps that we can take so that they know what action steps to take? How are we actually being present to ensure that mental health, and in this case, suicide as well, is being addressed? At the educational level, we talk about signs of looking at for students in general, like, all right, what are some signs? What are some things that you're noticing? We call it the tripod: the teacher, the student, and the family at home, in terms of, all right, how can we ensure that this person feels connected? If you want to throw a fourth leg in there, a school counselor, or any type of mental resource. And so that way it's known as you go through, you still have different avenues to communicate and express how you're feeling, address mental health issues before it gets to a point where suicide becomes a feeling of control, of wanting to take leverage of what that is. And I think that's one of the things that we can definitely focus on, is implementing those programs.
Let's stay in that space for a minute. I think this idea of education matters. We talked a lot about clinical work, these brothers in private practice and working for universities and the like. That yes prep piece that you mentioned earlier still kind of resonates with me. I'm at LSU, big school of medicine. We allocated in the middle of the budget year this year an extra $1 million for more security. And there's police driving around with their blinkers on all the time now, day and night, or what have you. So it feels more real and more palpable. One does wonder, are we doing enough in the education space? And I ask that question of you because so many places have said that more Black men should go in education. We should teach. We should be principals. We should be counselors. We should be in school settings. My father was an elementary educator for a quarter of a century, by the way. And I do wonder, you speak from, I think, experience and expertise, what might we do externally as a fraternity? You mentioned what programs Alpha has. People say go to schools. What would you recommend would be the best way for us to, if we were going to make recommendations to we got guys with a national president now, that our Alpha program could actually be beneficial. Somebody who I think has touched schools, maybe to speak very, very directly on that. And then I'm gonna go to doctors, Guy and Turner, to see what their thoughts are about what's happening in their spaces in Houston and New Orleans. But let's start off with you, Dr. Wynn, with your work in schools.
Absolutely. Education, man, it's extremely important to have that representation present, especially at Yes Prep. One of the things that I've definitely noticed with our young Black students is being able to connect and gravitate to our younger generation of Black educators. And it's been a powerful force. One of the after-school programs that we had was extremely incredible for them because it was a connected piece. They are going to be after school already, but having these role models to look like them, cultural competence, understood them, and just were being themselves was extremely impactful. And so it's one of the things where, yeah, having leadership roles where we have Black leadership at the schools that are representative. That's another aspect as well. Different Yes Prep schools have different higher demographics of Black students or Latino students, but having that representation there is extremely vital, so that students feel recognized and that they feel comfortable going to. And then within Alpha, having college brothers come into the campus. I think one of the most fun things we did back in undergrad was going out to the students, telling them about college life, doing a couple step shows here and there for the kids. But it really gravitated them to, one, understand what is college about, but then you can tie that to an educational piece or practice or implementation of these type of different methods that we want to imply, which could be anything from sexual health with what we're already doing, as well as, in this case, mental health. And I think it will speak volumes to what it is that we can actually get to them if we have that representation present, whether at the leadership level, the academics level as teachers, admissions, just having that presence there. And then I know there's a lot of amazing Black educators within Alpha, a lot of great brothers that are in education that do that, and just having their presence there, wearing letters, talking to the kids, connecting with them, man, it's extremely impactful.
No time. I want to give both Doctors Guyan and Turner a chance to kind of discuss this education piece and what we can kind of do to kind of get into schools and play a role that really matters. Then I'm gonna give each one of you guys a chance to end with a minute or two of kind of your final comments. We're gonna end in about 8 minutes at 7:15 Central, and then we go to Surgeon General Brother Sterling. He'll be on for the last 15 minutes to summarize and make sure we kind of bring this to fruition. But let me go to both brothers Turner and Guyan, and I'll give each of the three of you a chance to make your last minute or two comments. Brother Guyan?
Yes, thank you. And again, Brother Bailey, I appreciate so much you included me in on this. It's a very critical issue. One thing I was just going to say with regards to that is, as far as getting into the schools, I recently had an experience where some of you may have heard of the Steve Fund, where we were able to get funding from them. And we developed a curriculum and went into the inner city schools here in Houston, where the majority of the students, of course, are Black and brown students. Of course, in Houston, if you're following the news, they say those are the schools that are failing, and it's been a lot of politics associated with it. But with that, we went well-being in color. Well-being in color was the curriculum, and we had like a 6-week series. We would go in. We worked in conjunction with the schools, and we educated high school students on mental health. And it's okay. We talked about mental health from a cultural perspective. We talked to them about reaching out, that there were resources that are available. This was an area to try to address, what they perceived to be an increase in suicide rate among young people of color. That was the whole objective, that they don't have to suffer in silence. There is help out there. There are people like the brothers that are here tonight, which is so good to see, that would be there for you. There is the 988, and we had video presentations, and we involved the high school students as peer educators. So, I would really, really, really like to see the brothers, particularly at the national level, endorse something like this, work with us. If we could pull something, we could do a project in New Orleans, we could do it in Houston, and it would provide a great database. I mean, we could get some research going with regards to that. Because what we did was just tip of the iceberg. And the kids they were hammering for more. They wanted more. They liked that. So, I guess that's kind of where I am with it. If there was something that we could do, if the brothers at the national, even local level but we're willing to support this. Of course, everything, needs some kind of underwriting cost to take care of essentials. But I would like to see something like that happen in the schools.
Brother Turner, thoughts?
Right. Good deal. So my first thought is that we got to make being a mental health professional cool. I think I do that as Xavier, man. Look, I think if you pull up on me as Xavier and I'm rocking an Alpha t-shirt, or if I'm in a fresh suit, either way it go, I think I've made it being cool. And I think the way we do that is we actually talk about this profession in a way that makes it attractive, right? That we get to actually help people by doing a couple of things Dr. White instilled in me. Dr. White was a Kappa too, but I loved him and God rest his soul. But he did a lot for me. But we used to say all the time that he was trying to help people by doing one thing. He was saying he's trying to saving their minds, changing their lives, and keeping the faith. I think that's what we do. So the way I do it, I want to make sure we get this right. We got to make sure this profession is well thought out and viable. I had a student one time who didn't think that making $50,000 was a lot of money. And I tried to explain to her that when you become a mental health care professional, you kind of get to set the stage for yourself. And so I think we have to be honest about the professional aspect of what we do from a financial standpoint. I think we all do okay. Some of us may be doing better than others. But I think professionally, we have to make sure people know that we actually do make a decent living in this field. That's the first thing. And let me say this in conjunction with that. We also have to make sure people have conduits through programs so that they can get there, whether it be master's level clinician, psychologist, psychiatrist, medical psychologist, nurse practitioners, psychiatric nurse practitioners. I think we have to make sure we tell the story, right? That's one. Second one, and I would say this in a playful way. We also have to make sure people understand that we're here to help. I am not an agent of any agency or any wrongdoing to my people. I will not act against the interests of my people, right? And Brother Bailey, you made a comment, and I say this with almost 20 years of experience through graduate school and training. I have not had to hospitalize a client against their will. I sit and I work with clients to make them understand. I walk with them every step of the way, and I empower them to make the right decisions with their families, right? I think that's a part of it. We have to remind folks that we are culturally competent in terms of our work within our communities to not act against our own best interests. The thing I would say about within a fraternity, and I really think this is dear, and I actually do think at some point this might become a legislative action within our chapter, Brother Bailey, is that we need to think about my brother's keeper having a real mental health component.
Yeah.
And I think, as the other two brothers have alluded to, if we make this a cornerstone of one of our general programs, I think we'll find that we can get those types of things. So yes, we might be able to find the opportunity and get the traction to get funding and to get support so that we can actually go into our schools, go into our spaces, and do the work that we need to do with the underwriting that's necessary. So those will be the three things. Make sure we let people know you can make a little bit of money doing this. Make sure people know we're not acting as agency of the government or against their will. And then I think we need to do just what Brother Wynn said. We need to make this a cornerstone of one of our programs so that we can actually have the underwriting, as Brother Ginn said, to make this happen.
Timely, well, you brothers are bringing it tonight. It's outstanding comments, outstanding ideas. Really appreciate it. In the minute and a half I have left, I think I'll give you guys 30 seconds to give your last little summary. And at 7:15 Central sharp, we're going to go to Surgeon General Brother Jeff Sterling. Let's keep it in order. Let's go with Brother Wynn. Let's go with Brother Dr. Guy. Let's go with Brother Turner. Try to give you 30 seconds to summarize, and we have some question and answer at the end. Brother Wynn?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, thank you everyone here for joining, and to the fellow panelists. I've learned a lot just hearing from y'all, share your experiences, and being able to translate that to younger generations so that we have that piece and we start to bridge together. It's extremely important. A lot of topics were discussed today, which is extremely just vital in understanding that this is a very multifaceted piece. And it just doesn't end here, right? This is another stepping stone to, again, continue to build. And what excites me about this is that hopefully we can implement that. That's something that we can definitely do. We can make this a cornerstone program like that was just mentioned. And I think that's extremely vital. And as long as we continue to move the steps forward and bridge the gap between the generations of brothers, but also as young Black men, that we can come together and actually solve these issues of suicide and also any type of depressive disorders, mental illness, things of that nature.
Good, Brother Guy.
Okay, well, I'll be brief. I mean, Brother Wynn pretty much said some of the same things, but I think it's important that we know we'll take care of our own. You know, we have enough talent, skills, knowledge, ability. It's no reason why we can't. And I think we just need to show more compassion. We want, of course, I believe in the motto of fraternity, you know, we're going to be servants of all, you know, and we can transcend all. So I'm in, you know, I'm optimistic about the things that and the power that we have as Black men, you know, to take care of our own. And I thank you again, Dr. Bailey, for including me on this.
Sounds good. A5. You close it out, Brother Turner.
Right. Brother Dr. Bailey, Brother Wynn, Brother Guyan, I appreciate you all for allowing me to share this space with you all. I think at this point in time, all has been said, and the only thing I would add is what I've been told time and time again. We have everything we need within our homes, within our community, within our fraternity. It's time for us to take talk to action and make it happen.
Well said. I want to thank all you brothers. Outstanding discussions, outstanding points this evening. My brother, Surgeon General Jeff Sterling said, let's have a discussion about suicide, but let's address the fact that the suicide numbers are increasing. What are really the problems that young Black males have that kind of bring this issue to the forefront? I thought of you guys. I'm glad you guys were all available and able to come on. Thank you very much again for your time. As we close out the didactic section, we'll move to the summary and overview of our primary discussant, Brother Surgeon General Jeff Sterling.
Greetings, everyone. This has been a fantastic discussion. I just want to thank our subject matter experts for joining us today. And I only have a degree in psychology, so I always enjoy listening to my colleagues who do this all day, every day. You know, as I sit here in an emergency department, I am actually reminded that there's a continuum, and these things are important for the audience to digest. You know, there's a difference qualitatively between mental health, maintenance, depression, and even suicide. It's okay to feel a certain way. It's part of the human condition. It's even okay to be depressed. Episodically, that actually is an appropriate response for us to have. When it comes to the issue of suicide, even suicidal ideation, as we describe it, meaning thoughts of suicide, isn't the same as an active suicidal gesture. You know, we always want to give you take home tips that you can use to be empowered. And one of the things that I'm asking everyone of the 1,000 or so people that will end up looking at this video to keep in mind is let's leave here and commit ourselves to having this conversation with someone who will be the equivalent of a sponsor. Let's put in place a buddy program where each one of us can have a conversation about when we need some mental health maintenance, when we're feeling depressed, or even when we're feeling suicidal. That step can make all the difference in the world, just to know that you have someone that you can turn to, someone who will intervene on your behalf and who will take care of you in the most stringent, most delicate of times. So make that commitment and do it immediately. Don't wait till tomorrow or the next day. Find that person who actually is going to be there for you and make that person your mental health partner, because you never know when you're going to need it. You know, one of the things that I want to throw back to the panel, and if we had more time, I'd actually throw a bomb in the panel's discussion, because I love the analogy that was being made about the different levels of masculinity, but I challenge you on where the line was actually drawn. There's a lot more on either side of either 50 Cent or Barack Obama. And I think that in fairness to individuals who consider themselves male and or masculine, and in acknowledgement of the current day's gender fluidity, I think it's kind of important to understand that people who are outside of those parameters that we outlined earlier this evening, that's where a lot of the suicide risk actually exists for people who don't feel comfortable inside of either one of those categorizations. So I would actually ask the panel to weigh in on, because this is what we see, and sitting here in the emergency department, this is the front line for where people who have active suicidal ideation come very often when they are indeed in harm's way. And again, I think this has been said, but I want to echo some comments that even though, according to demographics, elderly white men perhaps with an alcoholic inclination and history, still outweigh African Americans in suicide cases in the United States. We have seen a 60% increase in suicide cases recently amongst young Black men. And that really speaks to why it's so important for us to have these conversations, to have outlets, to know where we can go for help. So again, let me toss this back to the panel momentarily just to see if anyone wants to weigh in on the notion of where masculinity actually lies, because in many ways, the beauty of this conversation was that we were having conversations about both masculinity and the ramifications of distorted masculinity manifesting in suicide. So who wants to have it that?
I'll take it since I brought it up.
So you up, man.
So look, I was going to type this in the chat, but the video I use is when I teach a class called Black Psychology, and we talk about the pressures of Black masculinity, right? And so what happens is the large majority of Black men are feeling pressured by having to either be 50 Cent, who's been shot 9 times, who's a multimillionaire rapper, a film, TV star, driving 50 Ferraris and all this kind of stuff, right? Then you got Barack Obama, who ascended to the highest, most powerful seat in the world as president of these United States of America. We ain't gonna be that. Most of us, none of us, like the percentage of us who ever get there is so small, we'll never get there. So that's exactly the pressure that actually pushes our most vulnerable brothers to that distressing experience of what do I do? How do I live? And that's the most vulnerable. And I know, Brother Bailey, in New Orleans, oftentimes you and I talk about how distressed we can be. So, and we got some resources. So that's exactly the pressure cooker environment that our younger brothers, right? Our brothers who identify across the sexual identity spectrum, right? Who identify across the sexual spectrum, right? Who identify across the class spectrum and the economic spectrum, right? If we have resources and we're feeling stressed, then I know them brothers are dealing with it, right? So that's exactly what happens is 50 Cent and Barack Obama are being used in so many ways that we feel we have to live up to one of those, when in reality, that's never going to be our reality as Black men, as men of color. We have to be honest that the real Black man is Mr. Cliff, who lives down my block, who's a retired vet that I when I go in the gym, he's almost 80 years old. That man work out and be stronger than me most days. I have to be honest about the men who are in my community who show up every day. So yes, brother Sterling, you're right. Those two brothers are simply an aberration of Black masculinity that are used to encapsulate us too many times. We got to be honest. The real brothers is the brother that's going to drop his kid off at school and picking his kid up. The real brother is that brother that is dealing with his own stuff and needs our help. So yeah, I think that's a perfect question, and I like softball lives because I usually can hit them out the park.
Well done. So I want to take, again, we're coming up against time, so I have one other area in which I wanted to address. You know, Alpha Phi Alpha is not a health organization and certainly is not a mental health organization, but in the spirit of service to all, we actually, through this initiative, through our Health and Wellness Committee and the leadership provided by our general presidents over the years, of course, we have a founder who was a physician as well. We actually pursue matters of health as it impacts the brothers, our families, and the communities we serve. There's been much said this evening about things that we can do inside of the fraternity to continue to promote health. Rest assured that all of these conversations are being had, and you will be seeing initiatives that continue to roll out that take us further down the path to better engage our brothers, to share their talents with other brothers and those within our reach, and to continue to encourage individuals in the brotherhood to pursue this noble profession. So stay tuned, and you are also part of the solution, and consider yourselves deputized and soon to be engaged in what it is we're trying to do. This has been a fantastic conversation. I thank everyone for participating. We're going to continue the conversation moving forward. Brother Deputy Surgeon General Bailey, you always do a phenomenal job and you're greatly appreciated. On behalf of our General President, Dr. Willis Slonzer III, as well as the Board of Directors, I'm Brother Dr. Jeffrey Sterling, your Surgeon General, thanking you very much for your participation this evening and wishing you good night.